So when it comes to technical interviews, there's a few high-level things I want to bring up here. I want to emphasize that technical interviews are about skills. I want to show you also that ultimately it's about solving your employer's or potential employer's problems. The reason we have these really complex, weird technical interviews that stress everybody out, employers and applicants, is because ultimately the employer is trying to make a good decision from a hiring perspective. They don't want to waste time. It's when you make the wrong decision, it can literally waste tens of thousands of dollars, months of work. And so, and at the same time, when it comes to cutting edge data science skills, it's really difficult to know what good is. So we'll talk a little bit about the interview process and how you can prepare, and also how you can use job postings to know how you should be practicing your technical interviews. So first, I want to emphasize this part around skills and the fact that employers are overwhelmed. This is a study from McKinsey that was published recently, and the top two challenges that employers have when it comes to hiring is skills validation and finding job seekers with those right skills and getting them to apply. You'll notice it's not onboarding, it's not retention, it's not deciding who to apply, who to screen, and things like that. It's really about skills. And another good example here, this is from another report, is that there's been a huge increase, 21% in job postings on LinkedIn that are prioritizing skills over qualifications. So a qualification here would be potentially a certificate. It could be your academic credentials. People are more and more interested in skills now. And I think this is a trend that will continue. And a good example, illustration here in particular is around prompt engineering. If I'm hiring a prompt engineer, what degree should they have? Like, I don't think there was, like, if you're graduating, prompt engineering was not a thing when you started school, right? And that was 3-4 years ago, maybe slightly longer. But basically, it's like these things can be changing so quickly. And in fact, I was recently working with a startup that was hiring a prompt engineer, and literally this picture is representative of all of us interviewing prompt engineers. And the reason for this is, again, number one, we didn't know what to look for, right? Do we hire an AI researcher, someone with a PhD or master's in comp sci, or do we hire a subject matter expert, someone that maybe knows the space we're working in really well and doesn't have a background? I mean, prompt engineering, technically, you don't need to know how to code, right? But it helps to know how an LLM works. So this becomes really confusing. How do we test for this, right? Again, it's most people who were applying have used ChatGPT, but is that enough? I don't know. And I say I don't know, and I'm like, arguably I should know, right? And on top of that, we were getting applicants from all over the place. And so what we ended up doing, the structure, the way we put all of this together was, first, we had hundreds of people that we considered. We actually looked at two different types of people to bring on board: consultants and full-time roles. Consultants being like literally LLM researchers who consult on the side, versus full-time roles. And we literally had 6 people come in for day-long sessions with us, where they would spend 6 hours with us, 6 to 8 hours, excuse me, with us to actually work through a prompt engineering problem. We had to role play because we didn't know how else to do this. And so as you think about this, ask yourself, what is the employer looking for? Why are they interviewing you? And ultimately, going back to the start of the presentation, it's about solving their darn problems. So from that prompt engineering case study, you don't need to have an AI PhD, as long as you can come in and show that you're very thoughtful about prompt engineering, that you think about data set validation, that you think about building data sets properly, and of course applying the lessons learned to a prompt and iterating on it. That's wonderful. So ultimately, that's what you want to do, right? Is show that you could solve those problems. Whether that's converting a business problem to a data science one, shipping a product, or taking initiative in other ways. And again, I'll spend more time on this in the actual panel discussion, so we can show some illustrations. But ultimately, what you want to then do as a result is, if you're going through a technical interview, it's really about emphasizing that you can learn, that you can convert a business problem that they have, into a technical problem that you can then solve. Now, the way that this process typically works, again, this is, I'm going to breeze through this somewhat quickly because we have a few webinars we've run in the past, but there's a few different places where these sorts of technical interview components will come up. There might be a phone screen up front where you'll get a few questions asked from a technical perspective. There's going to be a remote interview probably that might last an hour or so that'll dive into a little more detail. On sites, which I put in quotes because this could be essentially these are interviews where you're going to spend several hours with the employer. So in that prompt engineering example that I mentioned, this is where we had the 6 folks show up for a day. There might be testing and a stakeholder presentation and a negotiation. If you're very curious about the process itself, and if you're specifically worried about tactics that you could be using within this process, again, we've got a few great webinars that we've run in the past. Acing Data and AI Interviews is the most relevant one here that we run with the Vector Institute. By the way, all these YouTube links, if you go to the Vector Institute's YouTube channel, they're all there as well. So if you're if you lose the links for whatever reason, just remember that. Now, there are a few updates to these webinar components that I do want to emphasize, however. So again, skills are becoming more important. End-to-end projects are becoming more important. And what I mean by end-to-end projects here is don't just show me you know Python. Don't just tell me that you know AI. If you can show me a working demo, let's say using Streamlit or Gradio or something like that, or a Django app where I can put something in and get something out, all of that shows that not only can you write code and solve problems, but you can actually ship solutions. That's really, really powerful. And by the way, oftentimes a lot of these technical interviews really focus on that. What they're trying to get out from you isn't like, do you know the difference between a set and a list in Python? People care, but they don't care that much. What they really care about is, can you use Python to build my product? Which is why this is so important. Lead coding is still a thing. So this is where you might be pair programming, or you might be asking asked very specific questions. But this idea of problem solving and solution architecture is becoming more and more relevant over time as well. One of the things that I do also want to emphasize here is, in addition to doing these mini projects and showing your employer that you're going through this, if you are going through the interview process, particularly if a recruiter has reached out to you to schedule some of those initial calls, ask them what the process is like. Again, don't be afraid to confidently just dive into what the process is and how you should prepare. Some companies, particularly bigger ones, actually have resources that they'll be able to share with you to walk you through the process and tell you what you should prepare for, how you should prepare. Smaller companies might not have those resources, but if you ask, generally speaking, people will gladly help you. So now there's, I'm going to go through 3 specific types of technical interviewing strategies and prep strategies here based on all of this. For researchers, applied data and AI folks, and then business. And the reason I want to talk about these separately for 2 or 3 minutes is that depending on what you're looking for or how you're looking, depending on the type of role you're looking for, excuse me, the actual prep process and the technical interviews will be a little different. So on the research side, if I'm interviewing people and running a technical interview, ultimately what I'm trying to figure out as an employer is, can you do cutting edge research, and can you take cutting edge research and convert it into my specific business problem and to solve my business problem or my technical problem? And so a few things that you want to do. The first is, actually, I'll throw the middle out first. Read papers and practice critiquing them. A very common strategy here for technical interviews is we'll give you a research paper and we'll say, great, read it over. We want to hear your thoughts on it, maybe in 30 minutes or something like that, or you might get this the night before. The idea here is, can you read research and decide whether it's relevant or not, what the pros and cons are, etc. The other thing that many people struggle with in research is actually taking research papers and writing code, implementing those research papers. And so that's another area that you want to practice. And Papers with Code is a good website where you'll actually be able to see examples like this. And last but not least, practice your business communication. One of the hardest things I find for researchers switching from research into industry is actually presenting and communicating their results. And solving a problem with business stakeholders. So if you can do that, that's the cherry on top. That's the thing that gets people really, really excited. On the applied AI and data side, this is a very broad category. ML ops, DevOps, data analytics, etc. A few things are really important here. This is the one where having a beautiful portfolio that is aligned with your strengths and the applications you're going to be working with is really important. If you go to phaseai.com, we've got a bunch of links there, specifically from Vector grads that I think are just wonderful examples of this. The point here is show, don't tell. If you're telling me you're a good data visualization person, you know what tells me more, you know what's more effective than telling me you're a good data visualization person? Showing me a really good data visualization you've built, right? That's the sort of thing that we often look for here when it comes to portfolios. Practice top-down communication. And a big pro tip here is record yourself. So oftentimes I find people will, they won't really practice their presentations ahead of time. So the first time they're presenting is in front of an employer or in front of an interviewer. And of course, then they ramble on, they're not quite ready. What you could do instead is pick a project. And by the way, if you're a researcher, pick a paper, maybe record yourself critiquing it or presenting whatever it is you're presenting. You know, go to sleep, wake up the next day, watch the recording once you've lost the context a little bit and see, you know, am I presenting clearly? Am I presenting confidently? Am I getting the right points across? All of this is really important. And then on the business side, in a similar way to the applied piece, focus on a portfolio, show that you can architect solutions to problems. The big thing that most people on the business side, whether that's consultants or managers even more broadly, that really struggle is actually knowing enough about the technology to keep the technology experts honest. Not that anyone's trying to fool you, but it's really difficult, especially in cutting edge spaces, to know what's realistic and what isn't. Everyone's telling you that generative AI is going to solve everything, right? That's like right now, that's certainly what I'm hearing. And so having the ability to see through that a little bit and reality check it and is really important. And so the architecture piece here is going one step further to say, okay, great, we're hearing about generative AI, we're hearing about LLMs predicting the next token in a sequence. Is that relevant to our business? How is it relevant to our business? Is it valuable and strategic to our business? If you could answer that question, you are amazing. The other thing that I would recommend is you don't need to be an expert coder if you're on the business side, but knowing how to code certainly helps. If you can script in Python, if you can script in VBA, let's say for Excel, then again, you're certainly a cut above everybody else. Now, one of the final thing that I'll say about all of this is if you're not sure how to prepare, if there's certain jobs you're looking for, review the job postings themselves. I'm going to go through this very, very quickly, but to give you an example, we're going to have Christina from Cohere speaking. Here's an example of a job posting where in this case, Cohere is talking about you may be a good fit if, right? If you've, and the last bullet point in particular really speaks to me. If you have built data pipelines and ETL processes to support large scale data sets, if you have a portfolio that shows this, if you're comfortable with building ETL pipelines and talking about them, Cohere is probably going to be very excited about you. Another example, also in the LLM space, is Anthropic. In their job postings, they actually have a representative project section. And so in this case, this is literally, if you worked on projects like this, they'll probably want to interview you, but also this is probably what your job looks like. So if you, when it comes to preparing for a technical interview, if you can literally, let's say I'll take the third bullet point, making a Wikipedia data set in a format that models can easily consume. What you can do to prepare now, let's say that you have a job interview with Anthropic next week, take Saturday, take tomorrow, and literally ask yourself, how does the Wikipedia data structure look? How do I crawl it? How do I convert it into something that makes sense for an LLM to ingest in some way or to train a new LLM potentially? What are those steps? Record yourself, architect it, literally diagram it out on a whiteboard. I won't go through these examples because I definitely want to get to the panel. But one of the final things that I will say here is as you're going through this process, just remember, record yourself, focus on the specifics. The more specific you get, the more powerful you seem and the more competent you seem. So someone who tells me they're good at AI, I don't know what that means. If they tell me they know how to use BioBERT for medical EHR optimization in some form, that's certainly a lot more powerful. Practice shipping end-to-end products and solutions. You could hire expert interviewers. That's something that some folks do right now, or you could go to the mock interviews that we run with Vector. And of course, buddy up. You could do all of this with someone who's in your shoes as well.